I'm Professor Gareth Evans, and I'm a consultant in medical genetics, and I'm also Professor of Medical Genetics and Cancer Epidemiology at University of Manchester, UK. So I guess I went to medical school. I ended up spending 5.5 years in the Army. During that time in the Army, I spent about 3 years doing pediatrics and got my sort of specialist exams, so as a pediatrician. But during that time, I worked as on a neonatal unit and got to know about genetics and thought, oh yeah, I fancy that. I didn't even know it existed as a specialty. So I got to know the consultant there and applied for a research job. The Army wouldn't let me go, so I had to do my time in the Army, and then I applied for genetics jobs and got a job in Manchester. And serendipitously, the job included being a clinical research fellow, but I needed to do the research in cancer. And so I was tasked in 1990 with setting up cancer genetic services in Manchester at the same time as doing research. And I started to do research on a condition called NF2-related schwannomatosis and did my thesis on that condition, collecting samples, doing an epidemiological study. And at the same time, I was seeing breast cancer families and collecting samples from them to try and find the genes. So it was a busy time. And that really inspired me that, it was the better fit for me than doing dysmorphology as a geneticist. And so from the get-go, I was really interested in research, finding the genes, and then finding the solutions, finding ways of picking up the cancers early, preventing the cancers, and that's really been the focus going forwards, and that's what's driven me, is really making a difference for people, so less people at risk of hereditary cancer are going to develop it or die from it, so that they're there for their future generations. So for BRCA1 and BRCA2, I started in 1990. The BRCA1 gene was linked to chromosome 17 in 1990. I went to the meeting where it was announced. It was all very exciting. In October 1990, the American Society of Human Genetics. And I'd already started collecting families. And in fact, we had a family in Manchester, a massive family called the Crolla family, where there were over 30 cases of breast cancer. And that family was pivotal in identifying the BRCA2 gene. So that gene was linked in 1994 and cloned in 1995. So BRCA1 was fully identified in 1994, and then BRCA2 fully identified in 1995. And then immediately after that, I was involved in the first pre-predictive testing. So even before BRCA1 was actually fully identified, we did what's called linkage analysis, so looking across the gene at markers so we could see which copy from which parent everyone had inherited. And from that, we were able to do testing in 5 families that had sufficient evidence that they were linked to the BRCA1 gene. And so we did the first testing before the gene was actually found. And I wrote that family up many years ago. And since then, obviously, we've in Manchester, we've got a database with 2,500 BRCA1 carriers, 2,500 BRCA2 carriers, and we've been able to do lots of work looking at cancer risk and looking at uptake of testing, screening, early detection, prevention. I don't have any real family connection to it, which I think drives a lot of people. I just think, when I started out, it was 1 in 3 people get cancer, then it's 40%, and now it's 1 in 2 people get cancer. I want to reverse that trend. I want to be able to be, there when those figures start going back down. And in particular, when you've got very high risks with BRCA1 and BRCA2, trying to prevent the cancers that in so many families have blighted those families, with people dying, women dying at a particularly young age before they've seen their children grow up. We really don't want to see that. So we want to be able to develop things that are going to make a difference. And I was the very early stages in the UK of MRI screening. And now we have been able, in women who have pre-symptomatic testing, so before they get cancer, we've now detected over 100 cancers in BRCA carriers, and only 4 of those have died. So at 20 years, we have 93% survival because of the screening. And then for ovarian cancer, it's more about prevention. It's more about removing the tubes and ovaries, and we're doing trials just removing the tubes first, because we think 80-90% of the cancers start in the tubes. So maybe if you remove the tubes, women don't have to go through an early menopause, and then you take the ovaries out when the menopause has actually happened. Well, obviously it's a great honour, and I have pretty much worked on BRCA1 and BRCA2 since those early days. So it feels great to be recognised, and that my work is recognised in the field. And it's lovely to be here in Philadelphia with so many true experts in the field, and lovely to give that 50-minute talk yesterday. I still think we have an issue with family communication, and that we need to solve the fact that some individuals we identify as carrying faults in BRCA1 and 2 don't tell their relatives. Not all families have great communication, and a lot of families just don't see the rest of the family. And so we need to find a way of improving that. I know the uptake of pre-symptomatic testing in the States is actually way lower than it is in the UK. Part of that, I think, is family communication. Part of it, I think, needs fixing is that in the States, people fear increase in their medical bills and insurance and how they deal with that. It's a lot easier in the UK, where all medical care is free at the point of delivery. So I think there's less disincentive to be tested, particularly now we know we can make a difference to not only life expectancy, but good quality life expectancy, and taking away that fear in many women of getting the nastier cancers. Mm-hmm. Well, BASA is obviously making a fantastic impact. You have a great group of researchers here that are sponsored by the BASA. I think it's being able to fund the best research and the best researchers, and there's no doubt that Susan, Cara, Kate are fantastic, and they're a brilliant team, and they have brilliant people around them. So I think Bryson Katona today, fantastic talk on the sort of gastroenterological risks with BRCA1 and BRCA2. It's just, I think, getting the right people, getting the money to the right people so we get the best research. I'd like to tell them there was a magic bullet that would stop them getting their cancers. And, we had just had a talk about PARP inhibitors. I'd love to think that maybe a 3-week course of a PARP inhibitor, every year might just clear away the bad cells, might normalize the cancer risk. We've still got work to do before we can start those sorts of trials. We need some sort of marker that tells us that it's actually doing the job. because trials are extremely expensive, especially prevention trials. So I think we have to have some sort of tissue test that is telling us that those bad cells are being got rid of and that it's worth continuing with the study. So I think those are the sorts of things. I'd love to know that there is a PARP inhibitor prevention trial happening, because if we can eliminate the excess risk of breast and ovarian cancer, prostate cancer in BRCA2 particularly, then women don't need to think about preventive surgery. Because the risk has been normalized. But there's a lot of work to do before we get to that stage.